Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. I always say there are three types of people, those who can count and those who can't. One of the stated non-themes of today's summit has to do with how CIOs engage with boards of directors. So we actually know from surveys that have been done, and even a survey BCG has done of a few thousand of our clients, that cybersecurity is the number one issue on the mind of 93% of CEOs. And it is discussed pretty much at every board meeting. So one of the big challenges that CIOs and chief security officers have is how to interface with the board, and so we thought we'd kind of address that today. So we have a distinguished panel of 3 chief information security officers and 1 CTO who have dealt successfully with this complex and challenging problem to communicate with the board. And I'd like to introduce them. Right here is Pedro Canhuate, who is head of cybersecurity at security at Facebook. For the past 3.5 years, he has supported the centralized infrastructure security team that ensures the data held in Facebook's production servers and corporate network is protected from bad actors. Prior to security, Pedro helped Facebook scale its infrastructure from thousands of servers in one location to over a dozen regions with multiple data centers and millions of servers. He led and built production engineering, a team ensuring Facebook is up and running 24/7 by embedding operations within engineering and solving operational problems through software. Lakshmi Hanspal is currently global CISO of Box. She's the executive leader for Box's trust office with accountability for corporate, customer, and product security, compliance, data protection, risk management, business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis management, and customer advocacy. Prior to Box, Lakshmi was VP and global CISO at SAP Ariba and senior leader for risk and info security at PayPal. Before PayPal, a chief information security strategist at Bank of America, as well as UBS and Hitachi. And Lakshmi started her career at Novell, a startup company founded by old friends of mine, Ray Norder and Drew Major, dating myself. And Lakshmi is a member of several advisory boards, including Cobalt, IO, Cypher Cloud, and HMD Strategy. Bill Martin is responsible for technology strategy and execution for all the business units that make up the operating companies at AEG. So I just got an email from AEG this morning. The Elton John concert series is on. Start buying your tickets. I saw him for my birthday on March 6th. It's a fabulous concert, so go ahead and do it.
And no, I can't get you tickets.
AEG is the company behind Staples Center, the O2, LA Live, the LA Kings, Coachella, and AXS Ticketing, just to name a few. And prior to AEG, Bill was the long-running, he doesn't want me to tell you how long, CIO at Royal Caribbean Cruises, where the IT team was regularly recognized for innovation excellence. Bill, you work for the most cool companies. So,
I think so.
Yeah. He's also a board member at Innovate at UCLA, HGNG, which is a hospitality technology organization, and serves in an advisory capacity for several other organizations. And down at the end is Krishna Narayanaswamy, is co-founder and CTO of Netskope. He has over 25 years of experience in areas of security, data networking, and is an expert in deep packet inspection and behavioral anomaly detection technologies. When prior to Netskope, Krishna was a distinguished engineer at Juniper, leading the next-gen firewall architecture, and before that he was a co-founder and system architect at Top Layer Networks, a serial entrepreneur here, balancing companies and senior engineering roles at 4 Systems and Digital Equipment Corporation. I used to work there too. Krishna has been awarded 50 patents. He outdoes me by a factor of 3.5, and has a dozen more pending patent applications. Okay. So we're contending that the board and C-suite want to really hear 2 primary things. What's the business value of cybersecurity? What business value does it bring to our company? And I don't understand the technology. Can you tell me what my risk is? Boards tend to like to deal in risk. So let's discuss today how you can address these two primary questions going forward in your companies as you're moving from on-prem mainframe data centers to public cloud-based software infrastructures and mobile devices and newer technologies. So I'd like to prime the pump with 3 questions and then open it to the audience and let you tear apart the panel. The first question I'd like to ask is if you panelists can tell us what you see as a business value that cybersecurity brings to your respective company, and maybe give us a little anecdote or example. And let me start with Bill.
No. Well, first of all, let me say I'm rather intimidated on this stage with the titles of the people that are here, because I am not a cybersecurity expert by any stretch of the imagination. But I can speak to the value that cybersecurity brings. When I arrived at AEG 3.5 years ago, we did not have a security program really to speak of. It was part of a few people's title, and we got lucky and found a really good CISO, brought him in, he's built the team, and the value that cybersecurity brings to our business is we talk about, cybersecurity as an insurance policy, it's a risk mitigator, it's all these things. It is all of that. But the real value in my mind that cybersecurity brings to an organization from a business perspective is the continuity of that business as a going concern. I'll give you just one simple example. We have completely migrated into cloud infrastructure at this point. And earlier this year, in the January, February timeframe, we have about 3,000 full-time equivalent employees, and that varies wildly as we do music festivals and things with part-time employees. But about 3,000 consistent full-time employees. And back in January and February, we were getting about 4 to 6 accounts compromised per week out of that 3,000. Now, once you've established a security program, you've got a run book against every one of those account compromises. What did they get into? What was taken? And it creates a firestorm across the business of, well, this happened, and particularly if it happens to an executive, which usually are the people that are targeted. We made the decision to go beyond privileged accounts and IT staff with multi-factor authentication and said, that's it. And I literally made the decision that stop everything that we're working on, all projects halt. All of our staff is going to go heads down to manage the change management of turning multi-factor authentication across all of our locations and all of our personnel. We did it in about 2.5 weeks. That ended at about the third week of February. And I can say as I sit here, and well, that's not wood, damn it. As I knock on wood, we have not had a single account compromise since that was completed. We're at the end of September. That has allowed our cybersecurity team to address a whole host of other initiatives that we wanted to achieve this year. It's allowed our IT team not to get bogged down in supporting people whose accounts have been compromised and what does that mean to them and all of the recovery efforts. And the business people that were being affected by it day in and day out are just doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. There's so many threats out there that if you can eliminate the impact of those threats in some small way, then you help your business move forward.
Who'd like to go next? Krishna? No.
So it really depends on the journey the enterprise or the company is within that cybersecurity space. For many, it might be setting that tone of what the business value is. But there are companies that are security first, born in the cloud. And for them, it's simple. The value is trust and brand. And one of the things that need to accompany that trust and brand, which I tend to do in my role, is the consequence of inaction on risks within the environment. And this is different from FUD, right? This is not about creating fear, but this is talking about here are the tech debt in our environment, and here would be the consequence of inaction in if we don't address them. And the consequence of inaction has multiple access. One of the access, of course, is time, but also as the complexity of the business increases, as the voracious appetite of the business increases, that's another factor to weigh in as well. So it's going to be trust and then consequence of inaction.
I'll take a stab at it. Thank you for having me here. Actually, Facebook is slightly different than most of your companies, and we sort of do things a little bit slightly different than others as well. And so I'm learning a lot about the enterprise space. I used to have an enterprise background a long time ago, but got out of that to the consumer space early in my career. One of the things that we find in terms of like efficiencies of scale and having the actual workforce be efficient at their job is one of the aims that we have from our cybersecurity programs. As Bill was saying, and a little bit of Lakshmi, whenever an event happens, you actually have to pivot a significant amount of people. There's a huge fan out. There's a significant amount of workforce that actually loses productivity. You slow down your innovation, you slow down your ability to get to market, you slow down all these processes, and the context switch that everybody has to do when a big event happens is very expensive, particularly to our software engineering ranks, where that is effectively our highest cost component. So if you can make their job easier by effectively solving their problems for them, then it actually makes everybody more efficient. An example of ours is at Facebook, we like to do a lot of common infrastructure by small teams that can get widely used by everybody else, and they solve a problem by default. Access control and authorization and authentication from a service-to-service perspective, or an employee accessing a server or an employee accessing data, is something that everybody has to worry about. I'd rather have 3 or 4 people focused on that problem, building a solution, than having thousands of engineers trying to figure out how to do authentication and authorization. So we tie into our common CI/CD pipelines, our containerization service. When you build a new service at Facebook, you get all of that for free. So that's the economies that we get by focusing on those.
Krishna.
Yeah, I would like to make 2 points. So one is, I think the most important value that cybersecurity brings is hold the brand reputation of your organization, right? As more and more assets are moving to the cloud and moving outside your perimeter, like what Bill said in his case, right? The more chances are that the data can be compromised. And if data is compromised, and we have seen with all the breaches that is going on, companies dig themselves in a hole and takes a long time to get out of it. So that is a big value that cybersecurity provides to enterprises. The second thing is more and more regulations are having teeth now. So if you take GDPR, for example, if you are caught in violation of GDPR, the fines that are associated with that is 4% of your top line revenue, right? So that's another value. By having cybersecurity and putting controls in place, you can at least avoid some of these things. And it's happening throughout the world, not just Europe. I mean, California has CCPA coming, and we're seeing many other countries throughout the world adopting regulations that have teeth that will penalize anybody who does not take proper action. So,
Thanks. I just like to add to that I see cybersecurity as something new that's following along where quality control and quality assurance and safety went before. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember when we would design a product and then we would put it into production, and then the quality control people would tell us what was wrong with it, and we'd have to redesign it. Mm-hmm. And somebody finally figured out, well, if you put a quality guy in the design meeting, it'll get through production the first time, it'll get out to the market, and you save time and money. Safety is another one. People complain about long passwords and other inconveniences that we have, and in the safety world, 10, 20, 30 years ago, people would complain about having to put on safety glasses before they went into the factory. And now nobody thinks twice about reaching over into the box, putting on the safety glasses as they walk through the door. It's not that much of an inconvenience. And in fact, many people even wear safety glasses at home when they do their hobby projects. So I think getting the culture in our companies to the point where people realize, Pedro, I love you, I love working with you, I trust you, but I cannot lend you my password. Right. It's just against, it's against company policy. Yeah. It's dangerous. Don't even ask me. Yeah. Right. So great. So let's talk about now communicating with the board. And in my experience, the boards of major corporations are not really understanding the deep technology of cybersecurity. So do you talk technology? Have you been able to educate the board in technology? Do you talk FUD, which I now call fear, uncertainty, and doom? Or do you see a benefit in quantifying cyber risk and presenting the board with a risk budget trade-off as opposed to a technology budget trade-off? And how does that work? So why don't we just go down the line?
It is easy to scare a board. You can tell them a lot about the worst of humanity and the things that are happening out there, and all they will do is not understand what to do next. They just sort of get a little bit more scared about the problems. So what we focus on is educating them in a relatable way. So giving specific scenarios on things, doing tabletop exercises with them to talk about what would we do if this were to happen or not happen, so they can actually ground it in reality. We have a unique thing that we do at Facebook that now a lot of other cybersecurity teams are doing across the world, which is in October during National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we have a thing called Hacktober, where what we do is we mimic real-world attacks across the employee base, including our board. So every once in a while, we will send something to a board member that is a phishing attack, and we will educate them in that process. If they did well, we'll tell them that they did well. If they didn't do well, we'll spend some time with them, educating them again about the things that they should be aware of and things like that. And we pay attention to their own devices, their own networks, where they're spending their time, because it is to Bill's point, an executive at the board getting compromised is a huge PR problem, right? So mostly focusing on relatability of the problems. Risk is an complicated thing at a company like Facebook because there are risks all over the place. So really it's a focus on making sure that they understand which risks we do believe from our threat intelligence team could actually become reality, and then talking about the mitigations that we're putting into place so that wouldn't happen.
Thanks. Lakshmi?
So there are two reporting relationships with the board within Box. One is with the supervisory board members, and one with the audit committee, which is made of sub-members of the supervisory board. And they have a little bit of a different view in which how you would present. Now, to the main supervisory board, we do something like a quarterly defense review, and a QDR comprises of three things. One is you talk about the risks in the environment, the operating risks in the environment, and you connect it to the guided investments, a strategic portfolio that you have in place for those risks. And sometimes you'll find risks hanging off the edge, sort of orphaned, and then the board would have questions on why was that not a priority right now? What are we doing about it? What is the go-to green on that? So those are some of the conversations on that first. The second is that the board nowadays also wants to know the composition of skills, capabilities within the organization today. So then we do a skill capability matrix for them where they can, where we're saying, in the next 6 months, we're going to dial up on these kind of capabilities. It could be like detection engineers versus just analysts, or it could be data science versus another area. So they also want to know where are the gaps in the capabilities we have within the teams or our support environment. And then what are we doing about this in the next 2-3 quarters? And the third aspect of the QDR is about tech debt. Do we know our tech debt in our environment? And what are some of the programs that we're putting in place? Or is, what is the risk we're writing off, saying that's the cost of doing business? And we're not going, what are some of the decisions we've taken on not addressing some part of tech debt, in some way? So those are three aspects. And the fourth one, I think Pedro mentioned, is it's important for us to educate the board in a way that we actually have to tell them when to freak out. I mean, so that's the thing, right? So don't freak out and everything, we'll let you know when to freak out. And in that way, we have the freak out scenario and the solution for it, right? So that's part of the, and then with the audit committee, there's a lot of over-rotation on risks within the environment, protecting on what we need to brace for, or what we would be looking at within the next 6 quarters out, so more than a year out. And those tend to be around just having clean audit reports that come in, risks in the environment, and then what other perhaps newer certifications we're going after.
AEG is a privately held firm, so there is no board per se. There's Phil. But there's also what we refer to as the Office of the Chair, which are the top 5 executives across the company, which includes the CEO. And we meet with them quarterly, similar to what Lakshmi was just saying. And we take more of a classic risk management approach to present what the risks are, graphing them like on a consultant's quad set of likelihood of the risk and the cost of that risk if we actually incur it, and then plot all of the various risks across there and demonstrate how those risks have changed over time each time that we meet with them. And obviously, you go to the upper right quadrant and you're looking for the highest risk that has the highest likelihood and the highest cost impact if you actually hit it. And those are the things we're addressing first. And it's been 2 years in place now with our CISO and his team. And what we're starting to do now, we've actually introduced a few other people from the company into that meeting beyond the Office of the Chair. So we're starting to introduce other non-cyber oriented risk into the same conversation because it's a broader conversation now. That gives the business basis on where should I be putting my money to defend our company on the cybersecurity basis. So as we've done things like the example that I shared before, that group sees an immediate payback. I think the other thing that you can do is take advantage of any opportunity that presents itself to educate your board or your C-level leaders. We had a scenario where we had an insider attack a little over a year ago, and I won't say who, but one of our executives said, well, I knew when we moved that stuff to the cloud that this was a bad idea. And I calmly shared with him that if we had not been in the cloud, we would not have known that this had happened. And we would not be able to stand here in front of you today and say, you've been violated by someone that you trusted. And as a result of that, to your point, I think you're great, I love you, but you're not getting my password. It means a whole lot more now, particularly with that C-suite after that incident. So take advantage of those incidents when you can to educate even further beyond your regular training programs and phishing expeditions and all the other things that we do.
That's great. Krishna.
Yeah, so as a technology provider, what we hear from customers, which will help them talk to the board, is to up-level the message. So basically, not in terms of technology as, I have a firewall, I have an IPS, and so on. But especially with the move to the cloud, what we've seen is customers want to know what kind of services are being used and what's the risk profile of those services, right? So one of the things that we have seen, which is widely adopted in the industry, is the Cloud Security Alliance's CCM, Cloud Controls Matrix. So if you've not seen that, I think that's a very good document that lays out some of the controls. So what we as technology provider, what we do is, how can we take that and quantify it? So what the board is looking for is, what are the services am I using, and what is the risk profile of those services, right? For example, if my user uploads a file, who owns that data? Does the service provider own it, or do I still own it? Things like that, right? So risk profile in terms of quantification, so just like how you and I have FICO scores, having a risk score for services in the cloud. The other thing that also seems to be very useful is the GDPR readiness, or the compliance readiness of a service that is being used, right? These are things that are not available offhand. Like, you cannot go somewhere and get that. And another important thing that we are seeing is, with the move to the public cloud, especially workloads moving to the public cloud, there are more and more breaches where public cloud resources are not configured correctly. So the ability to monitor public cloud resources to make sure that they're conforming to some profile, like a PCI profile or a NIST profile, is also a helpful tool that our customers see as valuable for communicating to the board.
Thanks. So based on all the clients that I visit, I have to say I really love Pedro's point. Tabletop exercises are what I call the Swiss Army knife of cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. They're great for education. Put your board through a tabletop exercise. Board members didn't get to be board members because they like to listen to PowerPoint presentations. They're action people, they like to talk. And if you put them in a tabletop exercise where they can experience and try and solve the problem, they learn a lot more from each other and from the problem than they would ever do from the best PowerPoint presentation. And then I found Bill's approach of this matrix where you have the likelihood and the impact. We've actually, together with cybersecurity at MIT Sloan's, the research consortium I co-founded, and BCG, and the Ashish Dev, the principal economist of the Federal Reserve Board, we've developed an approach to use what we call loss distribution approach, which is an old operational risk process where you can actually convolute those two and come up with a expected loss dollar value. And with the simulation model, you can say, well, this project that I could implement a project and it will reduce my risk by this much, and I can implement another project and I can prioritize all the things that I want to do in my cybersecurity strategy to reduce the risk, total risk of the company. It's actually measurable, so we found. So this is great. Let's move on to how we can deal with the modern trends of moving to the public cloud, mobile devices, how they're being impacted by cybersecurity, and how cybersecurity can help impact those, and can we bring additional business value through cyber, and I think particularly the concept of shift left and DevSecOps are really helpful in this area, because we're starting on new journeys. How can we make sure those new journeys we start on the right foot? So why don't we go the other way? Krishna, start first.
So what we have seen, the two important shifts that are happening is the move to the cloud and the work from anywhere, right? Any device, anywhere, people accessing data. So what this means to security, cybersecurity specifically, if you look at a traditional security stack in an organization, like what you may have is a bunch of appliances that does a whole bunch of things, right? But your data is moving to the cloud, and your data is being accessed from everywhere, so that perimeter kind of vanishes, and the perimeter is floating. So what we are saying is that the right place to provide cybersecurity is in the cloud, and the cloud offers some interesting capabilities, right? You have elastic scaling, but at the same time, also the modern cloud companies follow CI/CD principles, which means you're not waiting for an upgrade. Like today, if you have an appliance, you go and forcefully do the upgrade, whereas in the cloud, it automatically happens, you don't know. Which means that anybody developing the cybersecurity platform has to make sure that their development processes also follow good techniques of shifting left in terms of testing, so that anything that's deployed does not get your service down. So ultimately, we feel that you got to reimagine your perimeter. Perimeter is no longer where it is, and consuming that in the cloud seems to be the right way to provide cybersecurity.
I would echo exactly what you're saying, because what we have done is migrated everything to the cloud. And as a result of that, we gain the inherent security that exists in the cloud. We do not focus any of our security efforts on the network at all. In fact, we have begun contemplating, should we even have a network in the office? Or should we just connect all of our devices via cellular directly to the internet so they can go in a more direct path straight to the source of the information that they need to get. We're not there yet. We're not doing that yet. But it is something that we are taking a pretty hard look at currently, because we actually think it's a much cleaner way. And you're absolutely right. Once you've got it all there, and we've gone through a couple of extra exercises to make sure that we get everything there, so that we can gain that inherent security level that exists there.
Right. I think as companies, each one of us in our role, we know our businesses are right now thinking of priorities that requiring us as CISOs to rethink our boundaries of trust. And this is happening every single day for us with the initiatives with the business. And then, Bill, back to your point, clouds are secure. Are we using them securely?
Right.
Becomes the question
Yep.
of today, rather than 5 years ago or so, when we were asking the questions, are the clouds secure?
Right.
So when we think about that question, are we using them securely? You touched upon certain devices. I'm going to touch upon the trust level. So we have all the way from zero trust models like Beyond Corp that Google has deployed for all their corporate environments. This is where they went anywhere, anyhow, VPN less, but preserving the trust levels that they desire in the corporate environments, to differentiated levels of trust in our product and production environments, which is where our customer data is. So I think there's a knob to dial between zero trust and semi-trusted, and each one of us are in that journey to understand how much of the knob we need to dial today, and what does ideal Goldilocks target state look like for us in that area.
Great.
Yeah, Facebook is its own cloud, so we don't spend a lot of time in the public cloud, but we do have similar problems internally in terms of like data access and employees accessing data, as well as always being under constant attack from attackers outside. We implement a lot of what Lakshmi is talking about there. So the Beyond Corp, the idea that your office is basically a Starbucks. You should never trust it. You should never believe that somebody inside your network is a trusted actor. We also focus a lot of our time on making sure that, so we don't allow bring your own device, for example. We actually want to control the device, both the laptop or the mobile phone that an employee uses, because we can actually then wipe it remotely if we wanted to. We can make sure that we can have access to data. We can do forensics if we needed to without having to worry about the privacy issues inherent with an employee's personal information. The other thing that we do is on the shift left side, as I think Krishna was talking about, we spend a lot of our time doing static analysis in the code that we write. And so trying to find those bugs ourselves, trying to find them ahead of time, doing pen testing internally, doing sort of like another thing that Google came up with is a Project Zero, where you spend a lot of time trying to focus vulnerabilities on your own products and thinking about what an attacker could use to be able to gain access to your data. And that has been sort of very, very helpful for us to be able to find some of the vulnerabilities earlier. So.
Very good. This whole issue of DevSecOps, I think, is really value in this the shift left paradigm. Again, go back to the designing quality in rather than adding it on at the end. And we've actually got some numbers. We had one client I'll not name, but mention in particular, where they had a huge software development project, and then they got to, and it was an agile software development, where it was a DevOps process, and then after 16 weeks of development, they were ready to put the MVP into production, and they had to do cybersecurity testing, and whoops, there were just all kinds of vulnerabilities. And so we were actually able to measure the rework that was required. And then we went in and instituted a DevSecOps program where we trained the software engineers on secure coding. We put in static and dynamic code testing tools when we did pen testing, and in each agile sprint. And the vulnerabilities were then incorporated in the next agile sprint and into the ceremonies. And we actually then in the next 16 weeks showed that we reduced rework time by 62%. And we increased the speed to market by 20%. Mm-hmm. So we've got really hard numbers on that. And in the cloud environment, it's kind of interesting. All of the public cloud providers have cybersecurity tools, but they're all a little bit different. So what we've been able to help some clients do is build an abstraction layer where it says if I'm going to go into Azure, I'm glad none of the cloud providers are in the audience. I need these particular code snippets to implement security tools. If I'm in AWS, I need these particular code snippets. I'm in Alibaba Cloud, and we have global clients who they can't take data out of China, so they have to keep it in Alibaba Cloud in China. They have to put it in Swisscom Cloud in Europe because that's what the regulators like, and different clouds here. And it's actually doable to have a common cybersecurity framework and set of rules if you build all these code snippets out, so you can actually do that. And it saves, as you said, Pedro, a lot of time having this done for the engineers before they actually have to implement code and applications. Thank you all. Appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you.